Okay, good afternoon, members. Councillor Trevor Stott, we can now start the meeting.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to everybody to today's Planning Committee meeting of the Conway County Borough Council. And we will be attending remotely. I'm Councillor Trevor Stott and I will be chairing the meeting. In addition to committee members, we also have officers joining us to assist with our discussions. I would like to welcome Jennifer Chambers from Chamber Conservation, our heritage consultant, who will be available for questions for the Builder Street application. Could I also welcome Rhyn ap Gareth, who I believe is our new monitoring officer, if I've got your title correct there, Rhyn. And also, could I welcome John Rowlands from Highways, who's taken over from Vic Turner. Together with public speakers for some of the planning applications being considered today, who will be introduced at the appropriate time. For those viewing the live stream stroke recording, committee members are identified with an asterisk next to their name. Can I check that everyone can hear me? Members, if you could just indicate. Yeah, thank you. Can I remind members that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live streaming fail, the meeting will continue and the recording will be available through the council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind members that translation facilities are available and to choose your language of choice. If you wish to speak, please use the raise hand function. You can also use the chat facility, but please note I may not be able to monitor the chat facility during the meeting. All microphones will be muted. If you have indicated your intention to speak, I will invite you to turn your microphones on. If you leave the device for any reason, can you please ensure that you are muted and that you turn your video off? We will take things slowly, so every application gets due consideration. We now move on to the agenda, and the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence.
An apology from Councillor Dave Roberts, and Councillor Dave Rees will be a little late and join us as soon as he can.
Thank you for that. Item 2 is declaration of interest, Code of Local Government Conduct. Members are reminded that they must declare the existence and nature of their declared personal interests. Item 3, it's the urgent matters, notice of items which, in the opinion of the chair, should be considered at the meeting as a matter of urgency. I'm not aware of any urgent matters.
No, Chair, there are no urgent matters.
Thank you. So item 4 is the minutes, to approve and sign as a correct record the minutes of the previous meeting on the 10th of February. Do I have a member who will propose that we accept those meetings?
I'll move them, Chair. I'll move them.
Yeah, and a seconder as well. And can members indicate that they accept those minutes? Show of hands will be sufficient. Thank you, members. Can I just inform members before we move on to the agenda that both applications concerning the Pier Pavilion have been withdrawn from the agenda. So if we move on to the agenda, the first item is the deferred application from the previous committee meeting. Code reference 0/47857, the formation of public pay and display car park and contract parking area to residents at Deganwy Car Park, Station Road, Deganwy. Members' views are sought as to whether to reaffirm the resolution of the previous meeting, which was minded to grant conditional planning permission, for a temporary period of 25 years, and to delegate the issuing of that such to the officers. I don't know if the planning officer wants to come in with any further information.
Chairman, David Watson here. The only update for members in the addendum is the policy section has raised no objections, subject to biodiversity enhancements being included, which incorporate a SUDS scheme. And that's the only update. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Watson. Okay, members, I got Councillor Nigel. Can you unmute, Councillor Nigel?
Sorry, Chair, I thought Councillor Peter Lewis had his hand up first, so I'll take...
You could well be right, Nigel. I think the problem with this new method is it doesn't show me who comes in first, so I do apologise for that. So if you're correct, then I'll invite Councillor Peter to address the committee.
Well, thank you, Chair. I note what Dave Watson has said. I just wondered what the consequences were that weren't referred to at our meeting last month with those requests from planning policy, please.
Yeah.
Chair, if I can come back, if that's okay.
Mr. Watson, yeah.
I've looked at the proposed layout, and it does have some additional landscaping included in it, a very small area of planting, but that would be a type of ecological enhancement. If members wanted further ecological enhancement, there could be further landscaping, but I think there is something there in the scheme as it's presented. The other thing the policy section said was incorporating a SUD scheme. Well, the whole of the site is sort of gravel and unmade, and that would remain. So there isn't really a drainage issue with this site. So I don't really see a particular need to incorporate anything from that side of things.
Thank you. Are you satisfied with that, Councillor Peter?
Yes, indeed. Thank you. With that in mind, then I'd like to endorse the decision that we made last month, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Peter. Councillor Nigel, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I'll be happy to support Councillor Peter in that and second his proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ivor?
Yeah, just the atgoffa bobl dwi'n byw yn Llanfairpwll.
To remind people, I live in Llanfairpwll and the connection here is awful, so I do apologise. Yes, Councillor Peter has asked the question I wanted to ask, and I'm happy to support both speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dave Rees, you've withdrawn your hand there, so I take it you're satisfied with.
Yes, Chair, I was just going to second Councillor Peter. No problem there. Sorry I'm late for the meeting.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dave. Yeah. Okay, I haven't got any other members down to speak. So we've had a proposer and a seconder to reaffirm the decision of the committee from the last committee meeting, which was to approve the application. So if members could indicate to Jane whether you're for this proposal or against it, or you are just refraining from voting. Thank you. Jane?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stott. Councillor Philip Capper.
For.
Councillor Chris Cater.
For.
Councillor Pauline Heap-Williams.
For.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
For.
Councillor Alan Hunter.
For.
Councillor Peter Lewis.
For.
Councillor Tristan Lewis.
Obliged.
For.
Councillor Sue Lloyd-Williams.
For.
Councillor Yvonne Lloyd.
Obliged.
For.
Councillor Dave Rees.
For.
Councillor Austin Roberts.
For.
Councillor Nigel Smith.
Obliged.
For.
Councillor Ken Stevens.
For.
Councillor Trevor Stott.
Abstain, Jane.
Thank you, members. That's 13 in favour and 1 abstention.
Thank you. Thank you, members. We now consider the following reports. The first one is code reference 0/48144, the development of 77 dwellings comprising 21 houses and 56 apartments, together with associated external works at the land adjacent to Llandudno train station, Oxford Road and Builder Street, Llandudno. Okay, so we do have a speaker at this point. So if I could invite Mrs. Heather Sandage, who's going to speak in favour of the application. So, Ms. Sandage, is she available?
Yes, Heather's here.
Oh, yeah. Can I remind you just before you start that you have 3 minutes to address the committee, and you will be reminded with 30 seconds remaining. Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay.
In your own time, yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon. In my role as an economic development professional at Cushman & Wakefield, I'm making a statement today in support of this application by the Leyland Group, which has appropriately responded to the comments made at the last planning committee through the provision of both employment and play space within the scheme. The site lies in a visually prominent town centre location adjacent to the railway station in Llandudno. It's a brownfield gateway site that is critical to the perception of the town, but has laid vacant for over 15 years, providing absolutely no positive social or economic benefit and detracting from an otherwise attractive town centre through poor physical environment. The scheme therefore represents a really rare opportunity to have a transformative regenerative impact in an era when most seaside towns are struggling to diversify their offer and retain vibrancy in the face of changing working, living and spending patterns. It'll deliver 77 new affordable homes in a sustainable and accessible location to be operated by a respected registered provider, Clwyd Allen. It will start to address the long waiting list of those in local housing need, help to get families out of publicly funded short-term accommodation and contribute to your housing targets. In the order of 170 new residents could be accommodated that will bring additional footfall, spend and vibrancy to the town, thus creating economic growth, increasing market confidence and encouraging further beneficial investment and development in the town. Council tax receipts could also be in the order of £100,000 per annum to you. The scheme's of good quality in its design that will enhance the physical environment of the area and create a more welcoming and safer surrounding environment. It represents a £12.7 million investment in the local area that could create 100 construction jobs for local trades through collaboration with Creating Enterprises Employment Academy that will help maximise local employability and skill development. Whilst the site is currently allocated for employment uses, it's remained vacant and undeveloped for many years, despite its public policy allocation, its visual prominence and locally known availability, and is likely to continue to do so for the foreseeable future without this scheme approval. And that's owing to the site's inability to compete with good quality, affordable space in more accessible locations, and critically, the lack of financial viability given that build costs exceed values in this area. Indeed, our development appraisals looking at an employment scheme on this site found a deficit of over 3 million, and that's despite no land value and no inclusion of abnormal costs. As such, no developer would be able to bring forward this site for employment uses without
30 seconds
or a significant pre-let. By way of a compromise, Leyland Group are willing to market the site for 12 months to try and ensure that any latent demand for employment space is attracted to the site. They're an established and proactive developer with a demonstrable track record of delivery and have made a confirmed commitment to bring forward this site despite all the challenges to enable to bring those pre-described benefits to the Llandudno and wider Conway community. And as such, I think there's a really strong and justifiable case to approve this application.
Thank you very much, Ms. Standage. Thank you.
Not long, 3 minutes, is it?
There's a habit to speed up, isn't there, when
yeah.
you get that 30 seconds?
I had to shorten it to fit it in.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I bring in the planning officer now, who's dealing with this? I think this is Mr. Watson, isn't it, Dave?
Yep, thank you, Chairman. There's a lot of information in the addendum. That's partly because the application has relatively recently been submitted, and we put it on committee relatively early, because obviously there's a pressing time frame to get a decision, hopefully for the applicant, in order to secure the Welsh Government funding for the housing scheme. But because of that, there's a lot of information in the addendum, which are basically the normal consultation responses that we would otherwise have put into the report. So I wasn't going to go through those in detail. There's a lot of information there. In terms of the application details update, amended plans were submitted, and they have included details that were requested by the Highways Officer. In terms of the Section 106 legal agreement, the applicant has said that they won't accept any form of agreement which actually ties the housing development to the employment development in the other application. And just for sort of background information, members are aware that in December you looked at a scheme and that was for 89 dwellings. Now effectively we've got 2 applications. One is for a smaller site, and that's for some employment land, and then this is the remaining larger area of the site for 77 units. And there's two separate planning applications, and you're considering the residential one for 77 dwellings. So the applicant has said that they're not prepared to tie those, agree to tying those two developments together in order to, require a sort of phased delivery of the employment land. That the affordable housing is 100% affordable, is supported by grant funding, and the applicant says there's limited scope to act financially to enable the development of the employment part. On-site public open space provision, the applicant has said also that they won't increase the amount of public open space provision as requested by policy. And they say that the application already has more open space provision than the scheme that was considered by members previously in December. They have, though, confirmed that they would be prepared to agree the financial planning obligations that are required by planning policy and by highways. And I'll come back to that a bit later. So I wasn't going to talk about all the consultation responses that are there in detail in the addendum. I was going to go to the last part where it's the material considerations update, which is page 10, I think it is. And in many respects, the consultation responses and the material considerations assessment is very much the same for this application from the officer's point of view as the scheme in December. So the heritage consultant maintains the objections to the design of the apartment block, much the same objections that there were to the earlier scheme. In terms of employment land allocation and the loss of the employment site, the policy section and the business development section, they also maintain their objections, and they say the applicant has failed to provide marketing details evidence as requested by planning policy and the planning committee previously in order to demonstrate a lack of interest and the prospect of development of that land for employment to justify the release of that land for housing. They go on to say that they don't consider that the 5 employment units in the separate application would justify the loss of the larger allocated employment site. Other material considerations like NRW objections and heritage objections and public open space objections still remain. The housing strategy section has advised that there is need for the affordable housing in Llandudno and provided those details in the addendum. Welsh Water doesn't object to the foul water drainage, and the surface water drainage would be controlled by SAB approval. Nature conservation, the ecologist considers that the mitigation and enhancement measures are sufficient. The highway officer has considered the amended plans, has no objections to the development, subject to planning obligations of £142,000 to compensate for the parking shortfall, and that would be secured by a Section 106 agreement. Planning obligations update. The main change there is that the applicant hasn't agreed. It was suggested to the applicant that they could look at an alternative public open space area within this latest application that would be a larger area and more able to cope with the children's play space, but the applicant has said that they're not willing to do that. So the area that's currently proposed is not of a sufficient size to accommodate the required children's play space area, informal area, and the equipped area for children. So because of that, the policy section are saying that there's actually a requirement then to provide a greater commuted sum to compensate for the non-provision of the adequate children's play space. So the planning obligations there are listed in the addendum: waste provision, off-site open space provision, of £45,000, allotment provision, libraries provision, parking provision, mitigation. So the applicant has agreed to all of those. The conclusions are much the same, they're unchanged. And I'll read this bit out, that the lack of marketing evidence from the applicant to justify the release of the allocated employment land and other material considerations. And there's objections from the heritage consultant and NRW, those remain. And officers don't consider that the benefits of the housing development and the other short-term economic benefits would outweigh the harm to the development and would cause unacceptable. So the recommendation has been revised from what was listed in the main agenda item when we were still waiting for consultation responses. We've now revised it to be more precise, and it's to refuse planning application on employment land policy, flood risk and heritage impact, and public open space grounds. That's all of the update. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Okay, members, I'm trying to remember the order I think I've got Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe. Councillor Andrew, I think your hand was the first that I saw.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Heather, for a good presentation. My feeling is, being involved in rented property, is that people are screaming out for affordable property. There isn't any. I can't think of another site anywhere near the middle of Llandudno which could accommodate this many houses. I am totally for it. The other thing is, at the moment, people that have found they can work from home are snapping up decent properties in our community, stopping the general rise in property. In Llanfyfechan now, we've only got 5 properties for sale, and one of which is a 2 up, 2 down at 155,000, which most people can't buy. I think we've got to look favourably on this application. I'm quite happy to propose that we agree it. I know there are objections. I know there's issues about the cladding which need to be resolved and such items, but if they can be resolved, I would be prepared to propose this for acceptance.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew.
Thank you.
I've got, according to my list, I've got Cynghorydd Tristan. Tristan?
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd.
Thanks, Chair. In the last meeting, I was for this, and there is a lot of call, a lot of demand for this sort of thing in Llandudno, but I am a little bit concerned regarding what we've had from Dave Watson and in the addendum here.
Of the dormers show very crude-like box treatments. There are concerns that the lack of attention to detail would mean that the building would weather poorly and be very prone to staining.
It is a pity that the plan wasn't more sympathetic towards the rest of Llandudno. I know it is on the outskirts, and there are some buildings here which are sort of retail buildings, but it's a pity that there isn't more detail to keep this building the same structure as the rest of Llandudno. That is, that it's modern and new, or more Victorian details, because I am for this, because there is a demand for this, but I'd like to see someone look on this sort of details. Thank you, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr, Tristan. I think it's Councillor Ken Stevens next. Councillor Ken.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, at the last site visit, there was concern regarding the look of this building as it's so close to the conservation area in Llandudno. Where, as far as I can see, it's only the end of the building which would face the conservation area. The actual length of the building would face either the train station or Builder Street. Furthermore, I can't think of another application that's come before this committee with 100% affordable housing on it. I think that's an amazing amazing plus for this development. I'd like to hear more arguments before I actually decide, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ken. Councillor Peter Lewis. Councillor Peter.
Well, thank you, Chair. I'll try and address the issues Ken is concerned about. And first of all, can I deal with the one about open spaces? What concerns me is that we seem to be interpreting our policy in two different ways. I'm sure officers will confirm that there is a play facility in Trinity Avenue, and from the application site to that, to my knowledge, there's one cul-de-sac road to cross. So otherwise, anybody using that wouldn't have to cross the road. And the distance to that particular site is far less than my villagers have to go to the site in my area. So from that point of view, I don't see that as a problem. In terms of the employment land, you'll be aware of the issue that's being considered in subsequent application later. And also the report we had in terms of the brickworks site. And it would appear that the demand for development land isn't very great within that area of Conway. And in terms of the comments from the heritage consultant, I have to say, I think that's a matter of subjection. I think we would agree that the properties opposite this site are certainly mixed, and certainly I would say that the proposal put forward is superior, in my view, to the appearance of some of the properties opposite. And again, play has been made on the importance of affordable housing. And in my view, that's a considerable material consideration, in my view, for us to consider this afternoon. And I will be supportive and prepared to second Andrew Hinchcliffe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peter. Councillor Pauline.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
When I was reading through this last night, I know that there's great benefits to this, but it's regenerating derelict land, and it's also affordable accommodation. And that the new application, it's improved on the old application, but it doesn't go in character with Llandudno. It doesn't go with the detail of the surroundings. They've not really paid much attention to the detail of the building, and the outside is of poor standard. And I just wonder what it would look like in 10 years' time. You know, it'll look lovely when it's first done, but, you know, will it be far worse in 10 years' time? But it does fail to meet the planning policies. The CTH2, that's development affecting heritage assets. Also DP1, DP3, DP4 and CTH1 as well. And until they can make it look more in keeping with the area, you know, Llandudno is very Victorian and historical, and that's what people love about it. You know, they love the area, and it's and I just can't approve this. So if I can go with the officer's recommendation to refuse this.
Thank you, Councillor Pauline. Councillor Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. A little bit disappointed with Councillor Pauline's comments there, but I want to ask the officers: is this site on a through road, or will it be a cul-de-sac?
Chairman,
yeah, Mr. Watson.
Well, Builder Street is I'm not quite sure what you mean by a through road, but it is a through road, isn't it? It does connect at both ends. So
okay, well,
and so
for me, it's not like a really busy street. It's not like a main road, and it takes you into an industrial part of Llandudno. One thing I'm mindful of, I was on a meeting recently with Julie James, our Welsh Minister for Housing, and she talks about the regeneration of town centres on the meeting that I attended. And I commented that we really need to get people living in the town centres instead of bolting on additional communities on the extremities of towns on green fields. We ought to be looking at developing within the centres on brownfields and bring people into the middle of the towns. So I'm mindful of that. I'm also mindful that my last conversation with Conway Head of Housing, Sam Parry, we had over 1,000 families waiting on our housing list. That's over 1,000 families, not 1,000 people, 1,000 households. And for me, that is absolutely shocking. We need to get real here and help the people that we all work for, the residents of Conway. They are desperate for housing. And comments about, I don't really like the look of this, or what will it look like in 10 years' time? I find it perplexing, because these people haven't got a house to live in, and we really need to be helping bring forward developments. More importantly, bring forward developments within the boundaries of towns and communities to help regenerate the economy. So this ticks many, many boxes for me, Chair. And I will certainly be supporting Councillor Andrews and Councillor Peters' recommendation here. And I hope that my fellow committee members will think about what I've said about the residents that are desperate for housing and the regeneration of our towns. These are very, very important things that our planning committee can have a say. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Lloyd-Williams. Councillor Sue, thank you for waiting patiently.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr. Cadeirydd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I remember rightly, I asked for it to be deferred last time. I know this is a bit different to the original one, but my concerns at the time regarding the original application, that there wasn't any evidence shown regarding promoting these sites for employment. We've had a discussion regarding this. There are concerns regarding that. Because for me, because there isn't any evidence within the reports, it is, for me, it reflects that the owner hasn't gone about looking at promoting the sites adequately for that purpose. But I also have to look at what exactly this application offers to the people of Llandudno and Conwy County. And as noted previously, it's not very often we have applications that offer 100% affordable housing.
We've fought long and hard over the years for 100% affordable housing within our county. So this is a massive bonus. It's massive for the people that we serve, being able to offer that type of housing. Ond dwi hefyd yn edrych hefyd.
But I'm also looking at the regeneration of Llandudno, and I know about this site, and as the site looks at the moment, it's a shame really that it is as it is, and if we don't support the application today, there is a danger that funding will be lost as long as this project is in the question. So there's a lot of things to consider, but I can't go against this application. It has been very difficult considering it. I can't go against it. I will be supporting the application and what's been said by Councillor Peter Lewis already. It's been proposed and seconded, I think. But considering what has been said and what's in the reports, I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Chris Cater. Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Chairman Trevor. Well, I took the big point that Councillor Nigel made about affordable housing and the waiting list and everything. Of course, that's extremely important. However, like Councillors Pauline and Tristan, I'm astonished that Clwyd Allen has come up with such an inferior design. I mean, the heritage consultant really is upset by this. It's called mediocre, it's called harmful. There's all sorts of terminology like that in the addendum that we're considering today. I just want to ask Dave Watson about how far we could go regarding the design, detailing and materials with conditions, because I noticed that the heritage consultant has said art stone is proposed instead of stucco to provide interest. This is a poor quality alternative to natural stone that's likely to weather very badly. Pauline's mentioned the 10 years, so that things are going to fall off the building or deteriorate in appearance. So could I ask Mr. Watson to tell us whether we could improve this with conditions and how far we could go?
Okay. Mr. Watson?
Yeah, thank you,
Dave,
Chairman.
would you like to respond?
I'm not sure it's a particularly easy question, really, because effectively what you're then asking is how much can we amend the scheme to make it acceptable, or you know, to improve it, and I'm wondering whether or not what could be done, whether it would be agreeable to the applicant as well, and whether they'd be prepared to accept it. So, but I'd like to think maybe that materials by and large would obviously could be controlled, and that could include things like render and other materials. And there's talk of roof materials, there's talk of render, there's also talk of UPVC windows not being appropriate when there's other better options. So there are aspects that we could look at to improve the materials, I would have thought, which I don't think would be going too far if committee felt that would make the scheme acceptable, which we should only really be putting conditions on of this nature if it makes the scheme acceptable, and otherwise unacceptable scheme acceptable. So we have to have a good reason for doing it. You have to be sort of satisfied that it would be unacceptable without these restrictions, and then justify that why it's necessary to put them on. But I think there is, if that's what you consider to be the case, I think you can do it. I don't think there's much scope for changing other elements of the design. I think those that would be a more fundamental change to the look of the building, and I don't think you could do that with planning conditions. So I think there is scope to change or to control materials. I'd like to probably also just see whether Paula had any further comments on that, and also see whether Jennifer Chambers has any further comments on that, because it's a sort of arguable point, really. So does Paula have anything to add?
Thank you, Dave. I agree. I think it's not an easy one to answer, and we can't go changing the scheme fundamentally, because we'll end up with something different which members may not necessarily be happy with. And I think there are aspects that we can look at through the conditions, such as changing the materials for the windows, but we just have to be careful how far we go, and it also boils down to cost and viability as well for the developer and how they're willing to make those changes.
Can I just come back in quickly at that point?
Yeah,
Chairman. I have no problems, absolutely no problems with the efficient UPVC windows. That's not where I'm coming from at all. I mean, I know there's been a lot of controversy in Llandudno about people being forced to replace their UPVC buildings and everything. I think this this building needs to be as sound as possible as far as heat loss and from a you know, the being ecologically sound and so on. I have no problems in this part of the town. It'd be different if we were on the promenade or by the Pier Pavilion or somewhere, but you know, we're by the between the railway station and Builder Street, which has got all the industrial units there. So I really don't have a problem with the UPVC. It was just things like the stucco and the stone and the cladding and the block work that I was talking about. So just to put that in before the heritage consultant comes back in.
Yeah, thank you. Perhaps I could invite Jennifer now to advise us. Jennifer Chambers.
Hello. I think, yes, fundamentally, at least the scheme is broadly appropriate in terms of scale and massing, and it is the quality of materials and details that cause the big problems. But that is quite a number of things that are of concern. I mean, yes, through conditions that would make a massive difference to the scheme. But it is, I mean, say through the description of grey tiles on the roof, that is such a broad, you know, there is no commitment to quality and detail in the scheme at the moment, and that obviously leaves a massive, you know, a massive gulf in terms of the interpretation of what that might be, and whether you know, slate would be appropriate or just a high quality modern alternative that sat comfortably alongside the traditional materials. But you know, a grey concrete tile, you know, really would not be appropriate, and that would weather, you know, all these things that could weather very, very badly. And whilst the affordable housing is very, very welcomed, I think you have to ask the question if you've got a building that's looking in a poor condition in 10 or 20 years, what impact that would have on those people living there. And then actually you've got a much wider issue, and it could start to affect other buildings, or the problem duplicates itself through empty sites across the town. So yeah, I think it's fundamental that those issues do get addressed. But it is fortunate that we're not talking about the houses towards the rear of the site, and you know, we're not talking about the scale in the massing being a considerable problem.
Could I therefore propose that the proposal that I think it was by Councillor Peter be altered slightly to include a desire for negotiations over the materials and various other elements that affect the outside design of at least the front that's facing the police station and Augusta Street. Would that be acceptable, Peter, if we just try with conditions to upgrade as far as we can go the detailing and materials?
Well, just for clarification, perhaps Paula could tell me. I thought things like that actually were covered by building regulations in terms of the quality. I've been aware, for instance, that the colour of bricks had to be approved following planning approval. I just wondered whether or not this is something that's already going to be covered.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. To a degree, building regulations will look at sort of thermal values, whether it meets all the independent parts. But I think what we're talking about here is the aesthetic quality as well, and the appearance of the development. And that is slightly different because that's something that building regulations don't necessarily look at.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Austin. Got it?
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak. As you know, many of you know, in the last meeting, when we were discussing the plan, the original plan, I was supportive in principle, and I'm still supportive in principle of affordable housing. I think it's something that we really need, not only here in Conwy, but across the local authorities in Wales. But I have been talking to some people who live locally, and they do have their concerns. And one of those concerns is parking. That area, as I understand, has very narrow roads. There are many problems regarding parking cars here. And therefore, I just feel, because that we've spoken about conditions and so on, it's really important that the developers, if this does go on, does take into consideration that there are parking problems in this area, and that they do their best to try and deal with this problem so that we can make this easier for people in the area to park. But regarding the other debates, the design and so on, I do understand that Llandudno is a very special town regarding its architecture. With that said, there are many ugly buildings in Llandudno. So I don't have a problem with this side of things. Another thing I'd like to note is if we're going to refuse this proposal, Conwy County is going to miss out on grant funding from Welsh Government. I don't know if someone from the housing department will be able to give us more details regarding this and the housing statutory. I'd like to know how much money we would miss out on if we refuse this proposal. I'd like to know this from the housing strategy officer if possible. I also understand that the cabinet member is also supportive of this plan. And supporting of developments that do offer affordable housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Councillor Ken Stevens. Councillor Ken.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Austin just mentioned what I wanted to cover, actually. This funding from the Welsh Assembly to make these 100% affordable homes, how long does it last? If we say no now, are we going to lose that? Or is it some kind of, have we got time to actually refuse it and discuss what the finishes on the building should be like?
I don't know if one of the planning officers, Dave, do you want to come back on that one?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously have it in mind that if members support this application, we would be doing what we could do to try and get it determined by the end of March, which we understand to be the deadline for getting the Welsh Government grant. So that's the sort of date that the councillor was asking about. We have it in mind that we would have a special planning committee on the 25th of March. I don't know whether members have been notified of that yet. I think it's subject to the outcome of this committee, but that's what we have in mind. And it would be for almost for the purpose of members being able to reconsider this application, which is the normal protocol if you go contrary to officer's recommendation. So that's the 25th of March. There are other issues, obviously, as you're aware of, that there's the NRW objection on flood risk grounds, and we would have to notify NRW, and they may request the Welsh ministers to call in the application on flood risk grounds. Because it's also a departure from planning policy, there's a direction that we also notify the Welsh ministers as a departure from planning policy. So that it has to go to the Welsh ministers, and we also have to notify NRW, and they may ask for the Welsh ministers to call it in. So there are those other obstacles in the way before any approval could be granted, and it could be taken out of the council's hands if it's called in by the Welsh ministers. But all we can do effectively is refer it back to the planning committee, and we're looking at this 25th of March meeting as being a potential date. And then the other things will run alongside that, and we don't know what the outcome of them will be. So that, I think that's all we can say about the timing of it. In terms of, I'm thinking that if members do support the application, subject to further negotiation and consideration of certain design elements, which are largely materials, that is something which we could liaise with the applicant about, and we would have time to report back on that before you look at reaffirming your decision on the 25th of March. So that's how I think that would work out.
Thank you. It'd only be appropriate because there was questions asked about the grant, and I know we've got a housing strategy member there, so perhaps I could ask them if they want to make any comment at all on that.
Sorry, Jodie, I can't hear you.
Yeah, now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so I was asked how much funding could we secure this financial year if the application was approved today, and that's 1.8 million that will be approved. So just as a bit of a background to that sum, so each year we get an allocation of social housing grant, which we have to spend in that financial year. And any unspent grant will be sent back to the Welsh Government and redistributed across Wales to other local authority areas. What also happens is if you spend your full allocation, you can apply for additional funding at the end of the year, although this is not always guaranteed. So this year, what we have done is we put Build a Street forward for additional funding for the maximum of £8 million. And we have had verbal confirmation that we will secure at least 900,000. 900,000, yeah. But what's also happened this year is that we have had one scheme fall out of our programme. So we have got a slippage in our own programme of about 600,000. So which is why it comes up to approximately 1.8, because we've also got a scheme that's being discussed today, which hasn't got planning yet, which is another 200,000 as well. So yeah, 1.8 million. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, thank you, Jodie. Councillor Peter Lewis.
Well, thank you, Chair. I was aware of the fact that this would obviously have to come back, and I just wondered whether or not the applicant may well only have seen the notes that are made in the addendum in terms of quality of materials, and I thought that the applicant could address those if we decide to approve it today, because it obviously have to be referred back, as we've just been told, on the 25th of this month. So with that in mind, I'm mindful to leave the proposition as Andrew and I have proposed, with obviously reporting back on any talks that might take place with the applicant in terms of material quality.
Thank you. Perhaps it'd be advisable, before I ask Councillor Andrew, if I could ask Crean to guide us and advise us. Crean.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's obviously an interesting application, and I think we need to be a little bit careful in terms of the grant, because the fact there's a grant available shouldn't make a scheme that is unacceptable acceptable. So the material considerations which is before you are in the report. So it is a matter of fact there is a grant there, I accept that, but that shouldn't really be steering your decision, because it's not a material planning consideration. It is how it's funded. You know, it's a matter for the applicant, how they fund their scheme. All you're looking at are the material considerations in the scheme. I know it's easy for me to say that because, you know, we do have that in the background. However, there will be an opportunity if it goes against officer recommendation today. As you've heard, there are proposals to bring it back before the end of the month. So there will be an opportunity if matters transpire that further that the developer is listening to this discussion in order to bring further information at that time. But however, yes, you know, the proposal is before you at the moment as laid. Any other amendments will have to be considered separately, obviously.
Well, thank you, Ruth. Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. I am reassured by Dave Watson's opinion that they can go into discussion. I will say, as you turn into Augusta Street, you're facing on the left, Edwardian buildings which have been badly converted into retail premises on the right. You turn into Builder Street. There is a modern block of industrial units on your left. There are a row of what were probably once stables, which are something else. Then you get the very, very ugly storage building on the left. And at the far end of the premises, a pile of metal boxes. And if you look over the railway, you will see the back of a row of houses with 30s pebble dash. And we're worried about this block of houses which are going to home all these people. I'm sorry, I still propose that we go with the approval of the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, let me have a look. Councillor Nigel.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, interesting comment there, Andrew. Yeah, I totally agree. It's not exactly the most pleasing area of Llandudno, but as Councillor Peter Lewis has said, there's no harm in looking for betterment on the proposal. So I welcome your proposal and Peter seconding that, and I will be supporting you two gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that in my money didn't come into it as far as I was concerned. I think for me, it was the fact that the number of affordable houses that are needed for Conway. It's just fortuitous that the money happens to be following it. But regardless of whether the money was going to be there or not, I would still be wanting to support this because of their number of affordable houses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Peter. Councillor Ivor, Ivor.
I'm going to put the video on for a bit. I don't know how long it'll last. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, fine.
Yeah, I've got a shocking connection. I'll take the video off, actually, it might be better. Otherwise, yeah. You can hear me now, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be quick as I can because I'm probably going to get cut off. RSL properties are short in supply, and this is quick, basic supply and demand. The most, looking at the market assessment, the local housing market assessment, is it basically identifies that we have 231 units, I think, every year. This is in addition to existing commitments, which brings us to 372. Right, we currently supply about 92, so we're 75% rolling every year. So I'm asking the question: where are these houses going to come from? Yeah, so without actually tucking into some open green space, we are basically looking at a brownfield site here that has not been utilised for light industry, which has not been, it's been up there for grabs for a long time now. So let's be reasonable about this. 77 new affordable homes in a brownfield site is a Brucey bonus, I think. It's close to active travel routes. It's basically £13 million investment into an area which could do with it right now in the middle of a pandemic. 2 million funding, basically somebody else putting that into the pot as well. I think we should grab this with both hands. I'll be honest with you. It's not very often looking at that addendum last night, I thought, oh dear me, there's a lot to this. But just listening to the other councillors today, I do think that we should, try and embrace this one. I think we can overcome it. It's going to take a bit of overcoming as well, because some bigger boys are going to look at it, i.e. NRW. But I've got one question either to policy or to the officer. I'd like to suggest that, because I see parking going to be a problem here. That's the only thing that does stick in my mind. Is there some form of policy for allocated parking spaces, and could it be funded or help designated parking from Section 106 monies, basically? Is that one for Jody, or is that for planning policy?
I could respond on parking, but we also have.
Thank you.
We also have. I think Andrew Wilkinson might be here, which might be.
Oh, there.
I'll come in if you want on parking.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you, John.
Yeah. There's a shortfall on the site for parking.
Yes.
It's been shown there's been a calculation done, and therefore the applicant is proposing to put money towards the Highways Authority and being able to provide parking elsewhere or improvements to parking within the locality to accommodate the shortfall. And as part of this, we're getting money for 142,000 as part of a 106 agreement, which should overcome any parking issues.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Where are we up to now? Councillor, Councillor Chris Cater.
Yeah, just very quickly, Chairman, I just want to press Peter a little bit more about putting something in his recommendation that to approve about the detailing and materials. I know you say, okay, the applicant will be listening in and will hopefully go away and discuss this with the officers, but I must admit I would feel a lot more comfortable if something was put into that resolution. I'd ask Peter to consider that again, please.
Yeah, perhaps if I can just ask Paula myself before we continue, is it this full application and includes reserved matters as well, Paula? Because normally when it goes to reserved matters, doesn't it, the things like members have been discussing are usually looked at.
This is an application for full planning permission. Reserved matters are only discussed if it was an outline application. So this is a full planning application with all the details that have been provided. Yes, I think Councillor Kate has got a good point. I think we probably need to sort of drill down a little bit more in terms of what members are expecting to see, because I can't see there being potentially fundamental changes coming through from the conditions. Yes, we can change some of the materials, but I'm not quite sure as to the extent of change that members would want to see, and whether or not that would actually still resolve our conservation officers' concerns, and again officers' concerns, because we're equally concerned about the design and the impact that it has on the area.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
Chair, I realise what they're saying about the building materials, but as I've just said, there's loads of different building materials within 100 metres of this place, every sort of material you can think of, and I don't think this is going to clash with anything in particular. And then Pauline mentioned what it would be like in 10 years. Cartrefi Conway are winning prizes for how well they maintain their buildings and how they've managed them. I don't think Clwyd are any different, and will continue to keep these houses in good, worthwhile condition. And I absolutely still wish to press ahead. Fine if they want to discuss materials, but I could only see this delaying the move and, stopping this thing going ahead. I think a certain amount of materials can be discussed with the building control manager, but after that, I think we've got to decide that we want these buildings, and I want these buildings. Thank you.
Okay, members, I'm going to put it up to the vote now. I'm sure we've we've exhausted all the questioning, so I'll put it up. We've got a proposer and a seconder, which is to approve the application. Do we have any other propositions? No. Okay, members. So straightforward vote.
I think Councillor Pauline Heap-Williams wants to come in.
Yep. Councillor Pauline.
I did actually propose to go against it, but no one seconded me. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is any other member prepared to second Councillor Pauline's?
Mr. Chairman, I would second it, but I'm just going to vote against the proposal, which amounts to the same thing as far as I see.
Yeah, Chair.
Yeah, well, do you want to formalise that, Phil, and then if you second Councillor Pauline's, then
Okay,
it's a
I'll
straightforward
second
vote,
Councillor
then,
Pauline's proposal.
Chairman.
Yeah.
Just to advise, what we have is a proposal to approve with reasons. What's being proposed now is exactly what was said. If you don't agree with the proposal, you can vote against. If it falls, then we'll put another proposal up. It's not an amendment because it just negates the original proposal. So I would suggest that to vote, if you're not happy with the proposal, vote against, and then we'll need another proposal if that falls.
Yeah, I was going to say, Reen, we have to do that because what we've done in the past is we've normally had like a vote against, but if it was well, it was normally when it was against the planning officer's recommendation and it was a refusal, and therefore what we used to do then was the chair would ask for the reasons for refusal, if that makes sense. But I've just realised that what Councillor Pauline and seconded by Councillor Phil Capper are suggesting is supporting the officer's recommendation. So it's inherent there, isn't it?
That was my point, Mr. Chairman, that just voting against it actually is the same as another proposal. Right.
So are we putting the main vote up? I ask Reen again because I take what you're saying. So if we just put that up, our members for, against, or abstaining, yeah?
Yes, Chair. I just asked the planning officers, they're happy that they're satisfied with the reasons for going against. Yeah, they've been outlined. I think those have been clear in the discussion. So yes, we can go ahead and put the proposal up.
Okay, Councillor Nigel.
I was just going to say, I think it'd be useful if the proposer and seconder could just clarify and list their reasons so that because there has been a bit of to and froing, just for clarity, it would be helpful. Thank you.
I think our need for affordable housing outweighs anything else in this situation, and the materials, all right, they could be altered slightly, but I don't think they're going to make any difference whatsoever to the look of Llandudno. And I think this scheme is absolutely essential. And I put that our need for affordable housing is greater than anything else on this consideration. Thank you.
Councillor Peter, are you happy with Andrew's reasons?
Well, the other thing I would like to add is that I think the monies that the applicant is prepared to pay in terms of satisfying the 106 in terms of parking and the other things is quite substantial to justify going against officers' recommendation.
Fine, thank you, Councillor Peter. Have you got that, Mr. Watson? Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Let's put it up then, members. So it's just, this is a proposition been proposed and seconded that we approve the application. So this is for members. Jane, can you ask the members how they are voting, please?
Yes, I will do. Members, please state clearly if you're for, against, or abstaining. Councillor Phil Capper.
Against.
Councillor Chris Cater.
For on this occasion. I think it's coming back about the design and details.
Councillor Pauline Heap-Williams.
Against.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
For.
Councillor Alan Hunter.
For.
Councillor Peter Lewis.
For.
Councillor Tristan Lewis. I think he may have left the meeting actually.
Yeah, he may have,
yeah. Councillor Sue Lloyd-Williams.
Obliged.
4.
Councillor Ivor Lloyd. Councillor Ivor Lloyd, are you there? I'll come back to him just in case there's a connection issue. Councillor Dave Rees.
4.
Councillor Austin Roberts.
Obliged. 4.
Councillor Nigel Smith.
Obliged.
Councillor
4.
Ken Stevens.
4.
Councillor Trevor Stott.
I'm not voting, Jane. No.
Okay. Councillor Ivor Lloyd.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes. Councillor Ivor, can you indicate if you're
4,
for?
please.
Okay,
4.
diolch fawr iawn, thank you. Okay, members, I'll just tot it up. That's 10 in favour, 2 against and 1 abstention.
Okay, members, that's carried, and because it doesn't support the officers, it will come to a next meeting, which could possibly be an extra meeting before the end of the month. Okay, members, thank you. So if we move on to the next application, this is a full application for the erection of 29 dwellings, together with associated roads and open spaces, etc. The land off Caerllinen, Llandudno Junction. Can I bring the planning officer in? Mr. Watson again?
I think James Chan will probably be taking the lead on this.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah. James, do you want to lead in on this?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chairman. There are some updates in addendum to report to the members. Application details update. The applicant has submitted amended plans to address ecologists and highways officers' comments. The amendments include landscaping, planting details, biodiversity mitigation enhancements features, and road safety bollards on footways. We have also received marketing evidence from the applicant to justify the proposed housing development in this mixed-use allocated site. The details include statements from the applicant, also a letter from the commercial agent, Richard Bradley. The details show that the land has been marketed for employment use for over 12 months for the commercial agent, which has received very little interest and without any formal offer. The take-up rate of the existing office building within this allocated site is also very slow. The offices are still not fully occupied after 3 years. The applicant has also failed to apply for property investment fund to subsidize the commercial land use because Llandudno Junction was not in the designated Welsh Government priority areas. The commercial agent considers that any interest for employment use of the land unlikely in short to medium terms. The proposed housing development would help to subsidize the construction of the 4 employment units approved by the earlier planning permission in the adjacent land. We have also received an email from the applicant yesterday. The applicant would like to clarify a couple of points. Although the proposed rent-to-own and market rent houses may not be classed as affordable housing, the entire housing development would be funded by the Welsh Government and owned and managed by the Housing Association. It will provide homes for people who are unable to access open market housing. The applicant also clarified that the site layout would provide 1,200 square meters of open space, which is substantially above the 183 square meters required by the policy. Then we move on to consultation response update. CCBC ecologists, no objections. Natural Resources Wales, no objections, recommends condition to cover any potential land contamination matters. CCBC Highways Officer, the amendment still does not fully comply with the highway adoption standards, but has no objections to the development provided that the internal road and footway remain private and not to be adopted by the Highway Authority. Conway Town Council questions the proposed housing development on employment land, but appreciates that there is a need for additional affordable housing. Town Council also concerns about the potential impact on traffic flows on the A470 and A55 and the additional pressure on the local infrastructure. The Town Council would request an archaeological survey to be carried out before the commencement of the development. CCBC planning policy is quite a long response, but I try to summarize the key points here. Planning policy has reviewed the earlier consultation response back in November last year, following the submission of additional marketing details for employment use of land by the applicant. Planning policy acknowledged that this allocated site is for mixed housing, employment, and allotment use, but does not benefit from a comprehensive master plan to guide the development of different land use. CCPC planning policy also accepts the marketing evidence submitted by the applicant, which shows that the applicant's site has been marketed for employment use over 12 months, and there has been very little interest and without any formal offer. The existing office building within this allocated site is still not fully occupied after 3 years. Given the fact that there are already housing and school development within this allocated site, the preference would be to deliver more employment development within this allocated site. However, taking into account the marketing evidence submitted by the applicant and also the lack of a master plan to guide the development of different land use within this allocated site, planning policy considered that it would be difficult to argue a policy departure case purely based on the loss of employment land. Planning policy therefore withdraws the earlier objection regarding employment policy EMP2 and EMP4. That's the updates of the consultee's response. Now we turn to material considerations update. The first thing I want to clarify is the maps in the local plan, which relates to this allocated site. May I ask Julia to bring up the PowerPoint slides? I think it's slide number 28. We've discussed these maps with the members who attend the site visits yesterday, but in case some members missed site visits yesterday, the 4 maps above is the maps on the council website, which show different layers of different land use. You've got an orange cover housing, you've got purple cover employment land use, and you've got a green color cover allotment. Also, the pink just show the whole of the site, which is obviously a mixed-use allocated site. But the actual map that's attached to the LDP document, which is the one at the bottom, it only includes one combined layer, which covers all the 3 uses: housing, employment, and allotment. So there's a small difference between the map attached to a local plan document and the maps that's available on the council website, but this would not have any effect on the assessment of this application because the proposed housing developments clearly fall within the allocated site boundary. Thank you, Julia. And now bring it to housing and employment land use. This update basically refers back to the update CCBC planning policy consultation response. Policy team is now certified that there is enough marketing evidence to justify the loss of employment land for the proposed housing development, and the policy team therefore withdraws the earlier objections with regard to employment policy EMP2, EMP4, which said that policy presumes against the loss of employment land. high-risk considerations, again, this refers back to the update, high-risk officers consultation response. CCPC high-risk officers advise that the amendment still does not fully comply with the highway adoption standards. However, officers has no objections to a development provided that the internal roads and the footway remain private and not to be adopted by the highway authority. Planning obligations, the applicant has confirmed in writing acceptance of the required planning obligations, including ways, off-site open space contribution, allotments, and library contributions. So we have changed to the conclusion as well. The outstanding employment land use, highway, and planning obligations matters have been addressed, and the application can now be supported. The officer's recommendation has been amended accordingly to minded to approve conditional planning permissions subject to the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement to control the affordable housing and other planning obligations within 12 weeks of the planning committee resolution or any extended period that may be approved by the development and building control manager. If the Section 106 legal agreement has not been completed within 12 weeks of the planning committee resolutions or any extended period that may be approved by the development and building control manager to refuse the application. And lastly, to authorize development and building control manager to determine the application and the delegation. That's it for the update to the members. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, James. Councillor Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. Interesting one for me, this, because I'm again mindful of the facts that we're desperate for housing, but it really annoys me the fact that this application by this applicant is another one that has an unadopted highway. And I don't know what it is with this particular applicant, but I think they're the only one that builds accommodation within our county with unadopted roads. And I'm mindful of the long-term issues that unadopted roads bring to our residents. I'm chair of the Sandy Cove Task and Finish group, and we're meeting with Welsh ministers to try and address the issues of unadopted roads. And yet here we are today being asked to approve yet another unadopted road. And I have really mixed feelings. Yes, we want these houses, but unadopted roads, I wouldn't touch them with a barge pole. So I'll wait to see what my colleagues' comments are. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nigel. Councillor Chris Cater.
Thank you, Chairman. The site visit was very useful yesterday because James was able to explain the various phases of this development. And I don't know whether Julia could put up the map of the actual site, because there's phase 1 and phase 2. And James was aware yesterday. I was very concerned that the 4 business or industrial units were right at the end of what will be a totally residential cul-de-sac, which concerned me that we were having the industrial units right at the end of this rather than at the beginning. But it looks as if that I don't know if that's the right map. Yeah, that's the one there. James pointed out to me that phase 1 has already got planning permission, so we can't move those units, those industrial units at the end of the cul-de-sac. They're there, they've got planning permission. So what's in front of us today is marked in the red line, so it doesn't include that portion of the map. So I think on balance, I think we'll have to go with approval. They'll have to exist there at the end of this residential cul-de-sac, and I hope they don't upset the residents too much, but I'm happy to go with the officer's recommendation. I would propose that.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. Councillor Peter Lewis. Councillor Peter.
Well, thank you, Chair. I'm quite conscious that going back to marketing of those business units, to my knowledge, there's been a sign on the A470 for some considerable time offering the units for sale or letting, and obviously to date it's not been very productive, so I suppose that indicates the level of demand within the area. So I'm happy to second Councillor Chris's recommendation to approve, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. My concern is this is more building in Llandudno Junction. Mike Priestley isn't here today, but I'm sure he would be saying there isn't enough room in the schools and there isn't enough room in the doctors. And is there money there to help with those things? Because we're extending what was a lovely looking school with a couple of boxes on the end of it to accommodate the people at the brand new school. And if there's another 29 houses, which may or may not have a dozen children at any one time, it does seem that we're not looking at this. We're putting houses there regardless. So I just wondered if this has been considered. Llandudno Junction has grown so massively over the last few years, whether this is an issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Austin. Councillor Austin Roberts, Congorydd.
Diolch.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I went on these sites visits yesterday, and I haven't got anything. I haven't got any concerns, but I would like to draw the attention of the committee to how proud they was. I'm glad to see Welsh names on these developments, and these names were names on the fields there already. I think that's really important to keep that heritage, and I can only hope that this new development will have a Welsh name. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ken Stevens. Councillor Ken.
Thanks, Chair. Just a question, really. Are we able to put conditions on the existing industrial units at the end of this estate? So as you know, it can't be used for sort of, noisy or unobtrusive sort of, obtrusive industrial practices. Are we able to do that?
I wouldn't think. I'll bring a planning officer in, but I think if it's already got planning permission, conditions would have already been looked at. But I bow to the experience of the planning officers. Paula, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I can respond to this question.
Okay.
Planning permission has been granted previously under reference number 0047133. I think it's difficult to retrospectively impose conditions to any existing planning permission, and if residential amenity is a concern for the members, by definition, B1 uses include light industrial uses. That has been what has been approved for light industrial use, and by definition, in the use class orders, those uses should be satisfactory to be carried out within a residential area in terms of the noise impact, dust, and etc. So that should give us some or members some assurance to the fact that the approved B1 use shouldn't cause significant residential amenity impacts to the future occupiers of the future houses. That's the update I can give to the members.
Thank you. Paula, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'd also add that if there were going to be any uses in those units that would result in a different use, it's normally a B2, they're normally classed as uses that would generate a higher noise level, then clearly, as James has just said, they've only been approved for B1 uses, so the applicant would need to apply for planning permission for anything that's likely to be cause noise and detriment to the amenity of the area.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Ivo Lloyd.
Hello. Yeah.
Hello.
Just so on ffyrdd.
Talk about the roads. I don't see a respectable company like Adra developing this sort of development without looking after and maintaining roads. I don't think it's within their pattern, to be honest with you. What would the officer say about this, please?
Helo, ie, na i ddod I fewn am hwn, sori.
I'll come in this one.
Don't know what we're...
It is adopted as mentioned in this proposal. But we are very pleased to see that a company like Adra, they are a very good company, and we are happy that they'll be able to maintain this site appropriately as needed. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Councillor Phil Capper.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. That was the question I was going to be asking. I feel myself able to support this application, but I did have concerns that were expressed by Councillor Nigel with regard to the unadopted roads, but the question has now been answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phil. Councillor Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I've got a question first of all for Paul and then one for John Rowlands. Paula, are we able to condition that the roads are made up to adoptable standards?
No, we've covered this in planning committee previously. I don't think we're able to do that specifically under TAN. I think it's covered by TAN 18. Perhaps that's something else that maybe John can clarify, but my understanding is that we can't do that because it would be unreasonable, unnecessary, and wouldn't necessarily meet the tests as well in the circular.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
John, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, when I was working in Anglesey, we used to condition them all the time. If we knew that the roads were going to be proposed to be unadopted, we would request the condition that the construction of the road, although the layout may not be acceptable to us for adoption standards, but the actual construction of the road should be made up to an adoptable standard. So therefore meaning that the road is suitable for its purpose.
So we could condition that they're made up to adoptable standard.
I think that we can propose a condition that requires the construction of the road, as in the materials laid are constructed to an adoptable standard. Yeah,
that's very interesting, that, John, because as I say, I'm really concerned for my area, but my area is not the only area within the county that has developments where the holding company that's been in charge of the road over many years has gone into liquidation as a limited company and left the issue of the roads to the residents. And that is a big issue. And I was going to ask you, if we couldn't condition that the roads are made up to an adoptable standard, could we lower our standards so that we could adopt them at the lower standard? But if we can condition them, I would like to make a proposal that we approve the planning application, as we desperately need these houses. There's over 1,000 reasons why we need these houses, family-wise or household-wise. But I would like to ask that we condition that the roads are made up to adoptable standard, as recommended by the highways officer. Thank you very much.
I'm going to bring Paula in there, please, because I think we've thrown,
I'm a little bit worried about that approach at the moment because it's not something that we've had chance to discuss as officers as well. There's a couple of things. Previously, I know that this developer does enter into a maintenance agreement, so it's something I think the residents buy into, and then there is somebody then that will maintain the highways. And also, I'm not necessarily how sure it would be if we were to condition it, whether or not the layout does accord with highway adoptable standards anyway. So we could necessarily be conditioning something that the development can't achieve because the layout isn't there. For instance, the widths of the pavements and the highway may not necessarily be drawn to those standards. So then that could result in a fundamental change to the scheme. So then again, that's something I would have strong concerns about doing, because it wouldn't be appropriate to do.
Well, I think the highways officer has agreed that this has been done previously on several occasions by Anglesey Council, and I think it's something that we should be doing ourselves. Having visited a site in a similar area where the spine road was up to adoptable standard, but the side roads were only made of block paving, and seeing the deterioration on that block paving in a short period, when these companies 20, 30 years down the line go into liquidation, it leaves us with a lasting legacy of unadopted roads. And I think our members have only got to look at Sandy Cove as probably one of the worst examples in Wales, if not in the country as a whole, of what unadopted roads can turn out to be like. And I'm going to take the highways officers' recommendation that if it's good enough for Anglesey County Council to put in this condition that the roads are made up to a reasonable adoption standard, then my proposition stands, and I hope that I will get support from the committee members. Thank you very much, Chair.
Councillor Peter Lewis.
Well, I'm sorry, Chair, with due respect to the highways officer, this is not the meeting to change council policy. And I think I'm going to support Paula in so much that we've already approved applications for non-adopted roads. And I think this isn't a meeting for changing policy for that. I think, Nigel wants to bring that up to be considered at another meeting. That's for that. But as far as today's goes, I think we've got to accept what's before us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm conscious of members who want to speak, but I want to make sure that we've got all the professional advice. So I'll bring in Lisa, our solicitor. Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I've had to turn the video off because I've got a terrible connection. So I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to come back. Obviously, I appreciate what they might do in Anglesey Council, but this is obviously Conway Council, and it's the decision before us today. And I would urge members to follow the advice of our Development and Building Control Manager, Paula Jones, because if the proposed condition does not satisfy the circular for conditions and the
Thank you, Lisa. Sorry,
you
finished there. Thank you. Can I bring in Andy Wilkinson as well there for some professional advice? Andy? You'll have to unmute.
Yeah.
Andy.
Yes. You hear me now?
Yep, fine.
Yeah. Good. Thanks, Chair. I think I would tend to agree it's something for discussion at a later date, but just to reassure members that with an unadopted road, there is still inspection by council officers, and the developer has to lodge a bond for an unadopted road, which is then only released once completion of the work and inspection by the council officers. That's under the Advance Payments Code under the Highways Act. That's designed to avoid situations like a Sandy Cove where the road's just not completed. Of course, the inspection is that the road is to the developer's design and to their choice of materials and makeup. But I think generally developers will try and build something that is durable. And generally, the disagreements we have with developers about the standard of the road are generally on the horizontal layouts and sort of two-dimensional issues, which is the case here. It was to do with footways and lack of sort of access on footways and parking being accessed across footways. So generally, the actual construction will be of a suitable standard. And as I say, under the Advanced Payments Code, under the Highways Act, that's inspected by council officers to ensure that it's completed before the bond can be released.
Thank you. Paula, do you want to come back on this regarding planning side?
Yes, thank you. I mean, clearly there's some discussions that we need to have internally with highways to look at this further. But I would also advise that I'm aware that there's case law around this as well. So we'd need to involve legal, because the case law states that conditions cannot require roads to be offered for adoption. So I would strongly advise members going down this path at the moment. It's clearly something that we need to look at and discuss internally at the moment. You know.
Thank you. Yeah, John, do you want to come back? John Rowlands. John.
Yeah, sorry. Andrew's answered what I was going to say really about the APC notices. But yeah, I just want to reiterate that I wasn't proposing that we change the policy now while we're having this meeting. It's just what my experiences are dealing with another authority is that it has been done before, and maybe looking towards the future after we've had a few discussions about it, something that we might be able to incorporate in future in Conwy. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair.
Right,
yeah, sorry, I didn't have my hand up, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I know I am aware of members wanting to speak, but I just wanted to make sure that we got all the professional advice from the officers that we've got. So I've got, let me see who's next. I think it's Councillor Dave Rees, who's been very patient there. Councillor Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question to James, really. I'd just like to ask, is it the same developer that's already built in the local area, the estate in the wall next to the parking area where we were yesterday at the site visit?
You're referring to phase 1 and phase 3 development, am I correct?
I'm not sure which phase it is, James. I was just asking where we were at the site visit yesterday.
Yes.
The estate that's been built next to where we were parked, is it the same developer that actually has put this application in?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
Well, all I'd like to say then, thank you, James. All I'd like to say is these houses are built of a tremendously high standard. The finish, the estate itself is absolutely immaculate, with everything catered for, from solar panel heating to well-insulated houses to great parking areas, and every cul-de-sac and every road there is absolutely immaculate. And from what I saw on the site visit yesterday, I would recommend that we go with the officers' recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dave. Councillor Pauline. Councillor Pauline.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak. It's just a quick question, really, just to clarify. So we've got these houses that are being built, and there's an unadopted road going through, and that goes to an industrial estate. So then large vehicles are going to be driving through the houses. But who's going to be responsible for this, as in the payment of the resurfacing of the road? Because if there's going to be heavy vehicles going through a house, is that correct? Is that what you're saying? Or am I just not making sense?
I think I'll bring the planning Paula in, but I'm just reminding you that it's got B1 use on it, so perhaps Paula could clarify what sort of traffic they would expect on there.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
think
Please,
James will
Paula.
probably come in after me in a minute because he would have been to site more than I have and be familiar with it. But it's a B1 use, the fairly low key type of uses there. It's not sort of a heavy industrial plant, etc. that is going there. And if this road isn't being offered for adopting, it will be maintained where the residents will be putting into a management plan. So it'd be the management company that will be responsible for the upkeep of that road. I'm not sure if James wants to come in and discuss the area in a bit more general terms.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, we just referred to planning permission 47133 really, which allows 6 light industrial units. 2 of them will be replaced by the 6 houses in this application, leaving only 4 light industrial units at the corner of the site. When we look at the floor space, they're actually relatively small, really. I think each of the unit is just slightly over 100 square meters in terms of floor space. So I think sort of large scale commercial activity seems unlikely. If there's any concern, I think we can potentially bring in the high-risk officer as well, potentially got more experience compared to me. I mean, in terms of maintenance of the highway and how durable a certain construction or surface material would be. I think a high-risk officer would potentially maybe give you more information.
Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, so the maintenance and liability of the road would fall onto the management company or whoever the owner of the road is, whatever they set up between them, really. It wouldn't be adopted by the Highways Authority. We wouldn't maintain anything of it. And yeah, we would expect the house, the site to be built as per adoption standard in terms of construction. Therefore, standard construction materials would apply. So it would look like an ordinary estate road. However, it would be private, and we wouldn't have any liability on it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Ivor Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair.
To Andy Wilkinson's comment on a bond between the developer and the council before progressing on the development. Is that a gramping agreement, Andrew, you're referring to? Is he still there?
Hello. Yes, I'm still here.
Yeah, Andrew,
Sorry,
I respond.
I couldn't see myself because I was on page 2 of the and it was confusing me. Grampian agreement is to do with planning, I think, and this is the Advanced Payments Code is strictly Highways Act stuff, so it's not. I don't think it's a Grampian condition.
Is that under a 106 then?
No, it's
okay. Is that under?
No.
No.
It's a totally separate set of legislation to do with development on private roads under the Highways Act.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I did ask before whether any consideration had been given to either schools or medical facilities, and I expected somebody to come back and they didn't. So I just wondered if the schools had been asked whether they could accommodate whatever number of places 29 House might generate, and also we're waiting for a new medical centre in Llandudno Junction, and this will just add to the problems. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody wants to respond to that, whether that was in the report. Obviously, the planning officers send information out to consultees, and I'm sure we've had this in the past where we've not received any response. So I don't know if any officer wants to add further to that.
Chairman, I could respond. It says it in the main report that we've consulted the health board and they haven't responded. And just to remind members that this is an allocated site. So it's a site within the settlement boundary. It's allocated for mixed use development, combination or mix of industrial employment, housing and allotments. So we're not really debating whether it should be developed or not. It's already allocated. And the amount of housing is part of that allocation. And that's one of the things that's been debated and considered by policy. Policy aren't considering that there's a significant departure in this case with this going forward for housing. So we need housing as an authority. We need affordable housing. This again is in combination with ADRA. So it's supporting affordable housing, and there's an urgent need for that, as the members are aware, and that complies with planning policy. So in terms of impact on schools and health services, those matters have already really been assessed and dealt with as part of the LDP process.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Watson. Councillor Peter Lewis.
Well, I wasn't aware my hand was still up, Chair, but
it was, yeah. Yeah, it was. Yeah, sorry. If I could just tell members what happens is, it comes up on my screen who's asking to speak. But unfortunately, this system is such that before it used to be who was in line, now it goes alphabetically. So you could put your hand up second, and then all of a sudden you're down the end. So I do apologise if I miss anybody out who should have been in a nearer the front, if I can put it that way. So I've got Councillor Nigel to speak now.
I wouldn't worry too much, Chair. The British are used to queuing. Just on Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe's comments about the schools and the doctor's surgery, you know, we do sadly seem to always put the cart before the horse. And, you know, you've only got to look at the new school in Llandudno Junction, which is already oversubscribed and having a large extension built. It's ridiculous, and we need to get our policies sorted out. I just want to comment on Councillor Dave Rees's comments about the quality of the properties, and I'm not talking about the quality of the properties. I have no doubt they are of very high standard, but I'm mindful of the fact that Sandy Cove development in its time was a model example within this country. It was a garden city. It was a new adventure, and it all turned to mud. And I'm very mindful of that. And you know, I've been asking for a change in our policies for years now, Chair. But for years, the unadopted roads affect all our residents in all our communities, and I'm very mindful of that. It was very interesting what the highways officer said, that we can't condition that the roads are made adoptable, but they are made up to an adoptable standard, I think is what he said, or made of the materials that are of adoptable standard. And that's where I stand. I think when you see these modern housing estates with the block paving that just crumbles under the heavy weight of our refuse trucks, it doesn't bode well for the future. So whilst I want these houses, and there's over 1,000 reasons why I want these houses, I'd still stand that I would condition that the roads are made up to or made of a quality that is adoptable. I think we have to be fair to our residents going forward, and somebody here needs to make a stand for what is right, and that is not necessarily what the officers recommend. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Chris Cater. Councillor Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It seems hours ago, but I would just like to reiterate that I stick with my proposal right at the beginning. I think it was seconded by Councillor Peter that we go with the recommendations there in the addendum to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. Okay, members, I'm going to put it up to the vote. We've had a proposer and a seconder to approve the application as per the recommendation from the officers. Is there any other nominate? No. Okay, it's straightforward. So if members can indicate to Jane whether
sorry,
for
Councillor
the-
Trevor, does Councillor Nigel, do you want to come in?
Yeah, well, I did make a proposal. I think Trevor should be asking if anybody wants to second my proposal.
Right, okay, fine. Is anybody going to second Councillor Nigel's that you put a condition in that the highways have to be up to adoption standard? No, I think that's a silence there, Councillor Nigel. So if we move on to the vote, please, members, to either approve or to refuse or to abstain. Thank you. Jane, if you could take over, please.
Yeah, thank you, members. Councillor Phil Capper.
For.
Councillor Chris Cater.
For.
Councillor Pauline Heap-Williams.
For.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe. Councillor Andrew? I'll come back to him just in case. Councillor Alan Hunter?
For.
Councillor Peter Lewis?
For.
Councillor Tristan Lewis?
For. Obliged.
Councillor Sue Lloyd-Williams?
Obliged.
Councillor Yvonne Lloyd?
Obliged.
For.
Councillor Dave Rees?
For.
Councillor Austin Roberts?
Obliged.
For.
Councillor Nigel Smith?
An error then, because we need to get to
Against.
grips with the unadopted roads. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Ken Stevens?
In favour.
Councillor Trevor Stott?
Abstain, Jane.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe? Can you hear me? No, I don't think he's
I
there.
see him on the screen, Jane.
No. Okay, thank you, members. I'll just let you know now the outcome. That's 11 in favour, 1 against and 1 abstention.
Thank you. Thank you, members. We move on to the next application. It's reference 0/47958. It's for the approval of all matters reserved in respect of outline planning permission 0/46338, which was an outline application for residential development with all matters reserved at the land adjacent to the former Civic Centre, Abigail Road, Colwyn Bay. And if I can bring, I think it's Mr. Kerry Thomas. Kerry, can you?
Kerry, we can't hear you. No, we still can't hear you. Okay, can someone else maybe start?
Yep, I can take members through the addendum.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Katie.
Yeah. So we've had a couple of consultation responses received. The first one being from Housing Strategy, who state that they are happy to support the proposed housing mix. The second one we've received is from Planning Policy, which is in relation to the amended proposal, which details the planning obligations that would be required, and they're, as you can see, listed in the addendum there. Just an update in relation to waste. The comments from the waste manager remain outstanding, but just looking back at the outline application, no concerns were raised by the waste manager at that time, and the indicative layout proposed as part of the outline application is very similar to that that's proposed as part of the reserve matters application. There was just some queries made in relation to collection points for several plots, them being 7, 11, 13 and 14. Just looking at plot 7, that was previously a terrace property and is now a semi-detached property, so those comments no longer apply. Plot 11 has now been admitted, so those comments obviously would no longer apply either. And in relation to plots 13 and 14, those occupiers would be required to bring up their bins to the public road on collection days, which is becoming increasingly commonplace within new residential developments. In response to the concerns raised by the tree officer, the application has been amended in that plot 11 has now been removed and plot 10 has been relocated ever so slightly, along with the removal of the garage sieve in plot 10. Comments from the tree officer regarding the amended layout remain outstanding, and with that in mind, the recommendation remains as stated in the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Katie. Kerry, do you want to come back? Are we sound on vision?
No, Kerry, we still can't hear you, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Oh.
Can you?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I
we
don't
can
know.
Hear you now.
Thank you.
I don't know what's happened. Yeah, I've only just got one further thing to say, really, and that's in relation to the Section 106 agreement. Please bear in mind that this is an application for reserved matters, and the only matters that fall within the scope of this application are the reserved matters. So we're reporting an update on the Section 106 agreement contributions for information, but they don't form a part of the determination of this application. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Kerry. Councillor Chris Cater. Councillor Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, the site visit was very useful yesterday, and I think Ivo would have been really pleased with the huge oak tree that's at the centre of this development, which is going to be protected and encouraged to be as healthy as possible. It was it'll give the area real character. I'm surprised that the recommendation has still been minded to refuse. I thought from yesterday's site visit that the plans had been tweaked enough to address the concerns of the tree officer. I don't know whether the tree officer's with us today, but is it possible to switch it around and say minded to approve pending further necessary issues with the tree officer being sorted out? It just seems a bit harsh to go for refusal when we think we've sorted the tree problems out and things have been amended by the applicant accordingly.
I think I will bring the officer back. My understanding is that they that Katie has advised us about satisfying the tree officer, but perhaps I can bring Katie back in there.
At the moment we don't have the comments of the tree officer, so we're not aware at this stage whether the amendments are enough essentially to overcome his concerns. That's why the recommendation is stayed as it was in the committee report, which is minded to refuse unless the concerns of the tree officer are addressed. But if you were to essentially to flip that into a more positive recommendation, as you say to Councillor Cater, you could change that if you wanted to state minded to approve subject to the tree officer's concerns being addressed.
Yeah, that's what I propose to do, Chairman. Otherwise, I would defer it, but I certainly wouldn't refuse it. So if I could propose it being switched so that it's a positive, that the recommendation is to approve, dependent on the tree officer's determinations. Thank you.
Fine, thank you. I bring Paula in there in case she has anything further to add.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, unfortunately, we haven't been able to get our tree officer's comments because he's actually on leave. So he's back in next Tuesday. So no doubt as soon as he's back, we'll be chasing for an update from him. But in terms of changing the recommendation, well, that's up to members. But I don't really think it makes a big difference either way, because if the tree officer isn't happy, then potentially it could end up at refusal either way. Clearly, we were trying to avoid that and work and do our best to resolve the matter through discussion and perhaps any changes that arise.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Lewis. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on the same sheet as Councillor Chris. I thought it was totally unfair to refuse it when we haven't actually had the response from the tree officer having the applicant had withdrawn one of the plots, but was an issue. So I, in actual fact, prior to Councillor Chris was going to propose a deferment until our next meeting, until we had that response. But I'm equally happy to support his proposal to approve.
Thank you, Councillor Peter. Councillor Evor, Cynghorydd.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've tried to get hold of Matt Bardsley this week and found out that he was on an annual leave. So I was just going to clarify that situation in case it wasn't coming to the rest of the committee. So I, like Councillor Peter, Councillor Chris Cater, would be very happy to see this looked at on his return on Tuesday, and then we can move on from there. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I have got members, but I want to bring in our solicitor, Lisa. Do you want to comment?
Yes. Just to confirm, obviously, because the officer's recommendation is minded to refuse, subject to the tree officer being happy. If members are obviously going to be proposing in the alternative, then just in accordance with procedure, we would have to bring it back to the next planning committee for affirmation. Just so members are aware of that, so it's procedurally correct.
Okay, I'll change my proposal to just deferring it, Chair.
Yeah, I think that would be wise, Councillor Chris, and with your seconder's approval, because otherwise it just delays it, doesn't it? You know, if you want to change it, it's the procedure, isn't it? Councillor Peter, are you quite happy to?
Yes, yes, as I said, I was for deferral.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Dave, you put your hand down now, Dave Rees. Are you happy with that, Dave?
Yeah, I was just going to defer it, Chair, for the tree officers' recommendation.
Okay, so we have
Councillor
a proposal.
Trevor, Katie Roberts wants to come in, please.
Okay, Katie, sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to clarify that the recommendation is minded to approve, minded to refuse, unless the concerns of the tree officers have been addressed. So obviously now that we've received these amendments, we will be consulting the tree officer, and if the tree officer is satisfied that the amendments are sufficient to address his concerns, then the next step would be obviously to approve the application. I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, I understand that, because it's only progress, members. If I can just remind you, if you change the amendment and go against the planning officer's recommendation as it is now, it means that if that carries, that would still have to come back to another meeting. Whereas if you go with what is proposed, then the progress can continue without coming back to the committee. But that's up for you members to decide. Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
Well, I understood that too. I thought if we proposed it subject to the tree officer, it would then proceed. Whereas if we go with the planning officer now, it doesn't necessarily have to come up again. Whereas if we pass it so that he should agree, then it carries on. I'd rather we propose that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Evor.
Thanks, Chair. Can't we, if we are happy, or that Matt Bardsley is in agreement that he's happy with things, can't we delegate it to the officer?
If we pass it, yes.
Yeah.
I think what it is, Councillor Evor, is the recommendation from the officers is to refuse subject to the tree officer, where then it would change. But if you decide to change what is in front of you, you are then going in effect against the officer, and therefore it would have to come back to committee, which delays it until another committee meeting. Whereas if you go with the officer, because it's still subject to the tree officer agreeing, and if it is, then it would go ahead. But I defer to experience, and I think Paul has indicated she wants to address the
Thank you,
committee.
Chair. Yes, you're spot on there. Basically, if members go with our recommendation today, you're effectively providing us with delegated authority to resolve the matters through discussion with the tree officer. Clearly, if we get to a stage where he's not going to be happy, then we will have to consider refusal. But there's an in-between bit where we'll look at negotiation and see what the tree officer has to say.
Yeah.
Thank you. I actually got that this time. Yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Chris. Oh, sorry, Eva, I thought you'd finished.
Yeah, thank you. The trouble with this is that planning committee is all about balancing very inputs and policies and so on. And what I didn't like was the fact that possibly the tree officer may on balance decide it's just not satisfactory, but the committee might still approve it. We would automatically go to refusal. And I know in the past when I was chairing the committee, we flipped it around so that the applicant knew that this was heading towards approval. I mean, from what Kerry said yesterday on site and what we saw on site, it looked perfectly acceptable, frankly. And I mean, as I say, I've been surprised the way this was put round today after our site visit. Perhaps Kerry might want to come back on that, because that was the definite feeling I got yesterday, was that the applicant had gone over and above addressing the tree officer's issues. So I would still propose going for deferral so that it comes back to the committee and we have a look at it ourselves again.
Councillor Peter.
I agree, Chair, because there is an option for officers having discussion with the tree officer. When it comes back at the next meeting, they may well, as a result of that, actually change their recommendation. So at least I think we've got the safeguard for both members and officers that way. And we're only talking about a fortnight's time.
Yeah. So that clarification, Councillor Peter, that's to support Councillor Chris in a deferral, is it?
It is indeed.
Thank you. Okay, members, no other speakers. So we've had a proposer and a seconder for a deferral of this application till it comes back and they get the tree officer's report. Is there any other proposals? No. Okay, if you could put that up then, members. So Jane, if you could ask members how they intend to vote.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Trevor. Members, please state if you're for, against or abstaining. Councillor Philip Capper. Councillor Phil Capper. Must have left. Councillor Chris Cater.
For.
Councillor Pauline Heap-Williams.
For.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe. Councillor Andrew.
For. My internet is very variable. It's gone off 6 times during this meeting so far. I'm for.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Alan Hunter.
For.
Councillor Peter Lewis.
For.
Councillor Tristan Lewis.
Obliged.
For.
Councillor Sue Lloyd-Williams.
Obliged.
For.
Councillor Yvonne Lloyd.
Obliged.
For.
Councillor Dave Rees.
For.
Councillor Austin Roberts.
Obliged.
For.
Councillor Ken Stevens.
For.
And Councillor Trevor Stott.
Abstain, Jane.
Thank you, members. That's 11 in favour and 1 abstention.
Thank you. We move on to the last one now, which is 0/48054. The change of use of land and the creation of a car park at the former Civic Centre offices in Cohen Bay, known as Glanadon Hall, Civic offices, Abigail Road, Cohen Bay. Kerry, is this you again? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me now? Oh, good. Yes, we had the site visit yesterday. The only matter there is to report really of any significance is that there has been a revised layout that's been submitted in response to comments by the highway officer. Essentially, it means losing 10 parking spaces at the rear car park in order to provide sufficient space for two-way vehicle movements along the aisle. The highway officer doesn't have any concerns as a matter of principle. He has asked for the dimensions of the disabled parking bays to be increased, but as we saw yesterday, there's very limited space in front of the building to enable that to be achieved, and the dimensions do comply with the SPG. So our recommendation is now minded to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Dave Rees. Councillor Dave.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the officer's recommendations and we go with their actual recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Dave. Councillor Ken Stevens.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to make a modification. Actually, we were there yesterday and we saw the old boating lake it is going to be filled in. The idea is where the path comes through the gate, or which will be the driveway, we're taking out two young trees there and to make a roadway. I would like to ask that the roadway goes diagonally over the grass to the new car parking area, so as we can save the two trees, so as they don't have to be taken out. Chair, I'd like to recommend that.
Well, I seek advice from planning officers here, I think. So I don't know whether Kerry wants to come back on this or Paul.
Kerry, you're on
Kerry,
mute.
do you want to respond? Yeah.
I'm just wondering, is it worth getting a layout plan?
Yeah, that would be good.
On screen so we can discuss it further.
Yeah, I think that could be a good
Sorry,
idea.
yes, I'm just, hello. I'm
Hello?
just trying to get a copy of the plan. You'll just bear with me. I'll ask Julie to go to slide 5, please. So that plan shows the layout as it's proposed. The intention is to widen the existing path. There's an existing footpath that runs to the east side of the building and then along the side of the model boating pond. And the intention is to widen that to a road that will be suitable for two-way traffic along most of the length, except for a very small section where it passes through a gated entrance. And as we noted yesterday, the proposal would result in the removal of two small trees along the eastern boundary of the model boating pond. I haven't had the opportunity to discuss any revised layout with the applicants, but one thing I would ask you to bear in mind is that the scope of the application, the red line boundary of the application, is drawn very tightly around the development site. We can't ask for amendments to the site boundary as part of this application. It would need to come in as a new application. And we would also need to consider whether amending the site layout would be practical in traffic terms. So I'm not in a position to indicate whether we would be able to give support for such an amendment. But the committee has to determine the application as it stands. As I said, the application site boundary has been drawn tightly around the actual development site itself. So we would need to consider whether whether the development is acceptable as it stands. The two trees are not particularly significant visually. They are not trees which the tree officer has raised concerns over their removal, and we would be able to secure a condition requiring the replacement of those trees. So I don't see there are fundamentally points that would justify the refusal of planning permission, and I think we should really be looking at providing a suitable replacement to those trees. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Terry. Yeah. I've got Councillor Evo here. Councillor Evo.
Yeah, Kerry, the answer to my question.
Yes, Kerry has already answered my question. I was just going to, I wasn't I wasn't able to attend yesterday because I was in a funeral, but I just want to know what size the trees are. They are they saplings?
No, they're
Or
older,
are they quite
than that.
small?
They're older than saplings. They're bigger than saplings.
Okay, sorry,
What are they? What are we talking about?
Could you go to slide 20, Julia?
Maen nhw'n llai na 5 cube
They
yn
are smaller than 5 cube, aren't they, Kerry? I'm just asking Julia to go to the slide. Yes.
Julia can go to slide 20 so you can see the two trees on the right-hand side of the image. I believe they're white beam trees.
Then, yeah, okay. Ond ma'n fodd I ail
But
blannu.
it is possible to replant these somewhere else in the park. We will put a condition on the permission asking them to do that. Okay. I will therefore second the recommendation.
There we are. I'm just a little bit confused. What did Councillor Evo? You seem to trail off there. Could you just repeat what you were saying about those two trees?
Yeah, I was happy as long as basically if they're taken out and they're replanted. Obviously, two of the saplings are replaced or planted somewhere else in the curtilage of the park. That's fine. But and on the back of that, I'd like to second the recommendation. Yeah, the recommendation.
The recommendation, yeah. So we've had a proposer and a seconder to approve the applications. I don't know whether I could seek guidance from the planning officer. Could there just be a note to the applicant about those trees possibly being, I know perhaps if they go in the park, it's not their land, is it? So whether it...
If I can come back on that one, they're proposing to lease an area of land that's larger than the area of the application site itself. So I think we could impose a condition on the permission requiring replacement planting to be carried out.
Replanting.
Yes.
And like for like, yeah, if there's white beam coming out, could we put white beam back, yeah?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why that couldn't be conditioned.
Okay, members. So is the proposer and seconder happy with that condition being added to the proposal?
I proposed it, Chair, and I'm happy with that condition.
You're happy with
being
that?
Added.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember who seconded it. Did we have a seconder?
Evo.
Councillor Ivo Lloyd seconded.
Evo suggested it. Yeah. Okay, members. That's the proposal, and it's been seconded to approve with that condition added. So if members could indicate to Jane you're voting. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Councillor Stott. Yes, members, please indicate if you're for, against or abstaining. Councillor Phil Capper?
Yeah, I'm afraid I dropped out of the meeting, so haven't heard the whole discussion, so I'll abstain.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Chris Cater?
For.
Councillor Pauline Heap-Williams?
For.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe?
For.
Councillor Alan Hunter?
For.
Councillor Peter Lewis?
For.
Councillor Tristan Lewis?
Obliged.
For.
Councillor Sue Lloyd-Williams?
Obliged.
For.
Councillor Ivo Lloyd?
Obliged.
For.
Councillor Dave Rees?
For.
Councillor Austin Roberts, I believe, has left the meeting. Councillor Nigel Smith has left the meeting. Councillor Ken Stevens?
For with conditions, Chair.
Thank you, Ken. Councillor Trevor Stott?
Yeah, I'm not voting, Jane. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. So I can confirm that's 10 in favour and 1 abstention.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, members. That's the end of the meeting. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi, and hwyl fawr, and thank you for participating in a very lively debate.
Sorry, Chair, can I
Thank you
just
very much.
remind members there will be a special planning committee on the afternoon of the 25th of March. You will be notified accordingly tomorrow.
Can I just say I proposed that that meeting, and I've already got 2 meetings that afternoon, so I've got to do something. I don't know what.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew.
And I have another meeting.
Okay, I'll accept your apologies for the meeting unless I hear otherwise.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, members.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
All right.
Hwyl fawr. There you go. Yeah, it's all right. I'm just leaving the meeting.